Hey, folks, this podcast is brought to you by Parlay Play Fantasy Sports. Use my referral code RotoBrady. Get that sweet, sweet deposit bonus. They got paid contests coming to states near you. They're giving out boosts, bonuses. They're slashing lines all day long. Hop in those player prop DFS contests. It's a very unique and entertaining platform over there. And what is up, everybody? This is Brady Grove bringing you episode 204 of the Tap That MMA podcast. Looking forward to UFC Vegas 114 this weekend. Card is going to be at the UFC Apex in beautiful Las Vegas, Nevada at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. We've also got Cage Warriors 201, LFA 228, One Fight Night 41, KSW 116, and Cage Warriors 202 this weekend. For my picks on all that stuff and more, follow me on Twitter at RotoBrady. Follow the podcast at Tap That MMA Podcast on YouTube and Spotify. Now available on Apple Podcasts and Amazon Music. Follow me on Instagram at RotoBrady MMA. Check out my DFS Values Picks article that comes out on Fridays through RotoBaller. And check out recent interlude episodes. We've had some awesome ones lately. I've got more awesome ones on the books. Just me and Connor Bones Sloan got to talk to Devin Brown Bear Clark, 17-fight UFC veteran Devin Brown Bear Clark. That's currently out on YouTube. Go check it out. It's a very interesting conversation. And folks, not going to touch too much on last week, UFC 326. I did all right. Specifically, did well on the money line play on Dyer. That ended up working out in kind of the exact way we thought it would. Missed on Michael Johnson, missed on RDR. There was a handful of, misses where me and Connor both were kind of going in the wrong direction. Where I was right was at the very least Charles Oliveira capturing the BMF title, submitting Max Holloway in their rematch.
Hey, I'm not surprised.
So UFC 326, that was entertaining. We got a pretty star-powered installment of Zuffa Boxing on Sunday. I gotta stop doing these massive boxing parlays. Even minus 600 favorites apparently lose every weekend. I had such a good run with them. Got to tweak my strategy a little bit.
I want to tell me what you see. Let's go ahead and see by the fight what you saw in the ring.
Folks, it is late on Thursday, March 12th. Kentucky won today. Conference tournaments going on. Selection Sunday is on Sunday. The NCAA tournament right around the corner. This is a very exciting time to be interested in lots of different sports. But we got 14 fights on the slate for UFC Vegas 114, so let's get right after it. I'm actually going to try to do this as fast as possible tonight. First off, women's strawweight, Pierre Rodriguez and Sam Hughes. Pierre Rodriguez is actually the favorite here at minus 160. Sam Hughes plus 140. Now, Pierre Rodriguez, 11-2, 33 years old, did win their first matchup. That was in UFC Fight Night back in October of 2022. She had been in the UFC for a couple of fights at that point, was coming off a win against Kay Hansen. She's won 2 in a row now against Ketlin Susan, against Josephine Knudsen. Her only losses in the UFC, concerningly, we have an armbar loss to Jillian Robertson, okay, and then the headbutts incident with Ariana Carnelosi. Pierre Rodriguez in a lot of fights, I think she is, should probably win, but I do not trust the head she has on her shoulders when she uses it to smash people and loses fights because of it. Sam Page Hughes, 11-6 as a pro, also 33 years old. Now, she's had some rougher stretches in the UFC. Like, she did lose, 3 in a row, after, a nice run in LFA. She lost to Tisha Pennington, Loma Luke Boonman, and Luana Pinheiro in a row back in 2020 to 2021. Has the loss to Piera and has a loss to Yasmin Uruguay. But she has won 4 of her last 5 fights and 3 in a row over Victoria Dudakova, Stephanie Luciano, and just got a submission over Shauna Bannon. One of those wins was over Jacqueline Amorim, too. So here's where I stand on this. This is the first fight of the night. Women's strawweight. They fought before. Piera was able to get Sam Hughes down, I believe, like 5 times in that first fight. The striking was relatively close. It was 29-28 on all 3 scorecards. 5 takedowns out of 11 attempts only translated to a little under 2 minutes of control time. I think we've seen a better version of Sam Hughes over her last 3 fights. And I don't think Pierre is going to be able to get, that amount of takedowns. And I don't, the control that she got the first time wasn't that effective. Sam Hughes was only one judge away, or, 1 round away from walking away with that one. So I think you get her at a good value here as the plus 140 underdog. Hit it. Next up, we got Luan Lacerda and Heisher Sosa. Heisher Sosa is the minus 240 favorite. Luan Lacerda, the plus 205 underdog. Heisher Sosa coming off a win on the Contender Series by unanimous decision, outstruck Maxim Lee 32-13. 4 takedowns translated to almost 11 minutes of control time. Now that's effective taking down and control. 14-1 as a pro, hailing from Spain, and 30 years old. 6 wins by knockout, 3 by submission, 5 wins by decision. His only career losses by knockout. 5-1 in Fight Club Rush, 4-0 in Way of the Warrior. Wow, out of Spain. Fought opponents with decently good records coming into the UFC and coming into the Contender Series. He was the WoW vacant bantamweight champion. And his only career loss was, back in 2022, which is a ton of fights for him ago. And that was his 4th professional fight. He's got some international experience too in those IMMAF competitions. You always like to see that. Always a good indicator of some legitimacy there. Luan Lacerda, 13-3 as a pro, 33 years old. 1 loss by sub, 1 loss by knockout, 0 wins by knockout. All wins are 11 of 13 wins are by submission, 2 wins by decision, 1 loss by decision. So he came in through LFA. He was the Shudo Brazil bantamweight champion, but that's back in 2020. He has fought only since the year 2021, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times since the start of this decade. So, I mean, kind of forget about him being Shudo Brazil's champion. He did win twice in LFA back in 2021 and 2022 before coming into the UFC. He lost to Cody Stamann by unanimous decision, lost to Damone Blackshear by TKO, but then beat Simone Oliveira by 2nd-round armbar. Simone Oliveira is now 18-7, and he's now lost 4 in a row. Hasn't won since he won by split decision on the Contender Series, and has lost to Tony Gravely, Daniel Marcos, David Martinez, and Luan Lacerda. So, I mean, overall, Sosa has won 9 of his career, 14 wins inside the distance. Lacerda, what do I say? It's been one of each, basically. But was TKO'd by Damone Blackshear. Cody Stamann isn't much of a finisher. He got submitted by Ari Farias back in 2014. I don't trust the recent track record. Beating Simone Oliveira and getting back on a winning track is great. But this is still 1 win since May of 2022. Only 1 win in the UFC over that span of time. And for what Sosa has done in the UFC, even though it's just 1 win in the Contender Series, I trust what he did before that. He's been super active. He finishes a ton of especially over the last if you he hasn't had to go to he went to decision on the Contender Series, but before then he was on a 5-fight finish streak. So Sosa minus 240. I did use it in a parlay. I think he'd be good in DFS. I think Sosa by knockout or decision is actually the more likely of the two. Like if you were gonna go one individual one, I would say by knockout. If you want to do method of victory double chance, Sosa by knockout or by decision. Each of those individually is plus 215 and plus 275. Just because, like, I think a submission is on the table, but Lacerda, while he has been submitted before, that was back in 2014, 12 years ago. Most of his wins are by submission. That's going to be, more an area he is equipped to defend. Um, but I think it's on the table if, Lacerda ends up in danger. So, you can't rule it out. Inside the distance for Sosa is plus 105. Method of victory, double chance, Sosa by knockout plus 215, Sosa by decision plus 275. That's where I would end up going with that one. Um, this could even be one like, maybe Sosa covers minus 3.5 at minus 125. I could see that happening too. Next up, we've got a women's bantamweight matchup between Bia Mesquita and Montse Rendon. It used to be Montserrat. I think it's just Montse. Uh, Rendon is the plus 575 underdog. Bia the minus 800 favorite. So Montse, born in 1989, she is not young. She is 2-3, 2-1 in the UFC. Both wins by split decision over Tamiris Vidal and Elise Pereira. Elise Pereira, the one who's like 19 yeyears old and lost in her UFC debut. Her only loss in the UFC is to Daria Zeleznikovia. She did at least get 3 takedowns in that fight. It was 29-28 on all 3 judges' scorecards, almost 5.5 minutes of control time. Not a bad performance against Daria, who herself is now 2-1 in the UFC, with her only loss being to Eileen Perez and a win over Melissa Mullins. Now, Bia Mesquita won in her UFC debut by rear naked choke over Irina Alekseeva. Outstruck her 36-6. Got 2 takedowns. Got the submission in the second round. Had 5 minutes of control time up to that point. Now, for those of you who don't know, Bia is 6-0 as a professional. She was born in 1991, so she's a little bit younger. Size wise, Montserrat is actually going to be 4 inches taller. With like a half-inch reach advantage, interestingly enough. So Bia, the Lady Goat, that is her nickname, won 1 fight by disqualification, 1 win by TKO knockout, and the other 4 by submission. She was 4-0 in LFA before coming into the UFC. She won the LFA vacant bantamweight title over Sierra Dinwoody back in June of 2025, and she has quite an illustrious professional grappling pedigree. IBJJF, ADCC, Abu Dhabi, Brazilian National Championships. She is a phenomenal grappler. There's a reason that, her pro MMA career started off with her winning with 3 straight rear naked chokes. So the concern is like, Montserrat is good at like close fights. She has been difficult to take down. Now the win like over Irina Alekseeva for Bia is also interesting because like she won against Stephanie Egger in her UFC debut and she's dropped 3 in a row. So how much does that really mean? But Monse, she hasn't been taken down in the UFC, which is important. She's been outstruck by Daria. So Bia, I don't think is obviously is not gonna want to have this be a kickboxing match. I think like if she really focuses exclusively on getting Montserrat down to the ground, I think she will eventually get her there. And who knows how easy it is to like keep Monse there when she's there. We haven't necessarily seen it. And if Bia does get her down to the ground, then Monse is going to be in immediate danger of getting submitted for as long as they're there. So, who holds the more well-rounded advantage? I guess Monset, but who holds the most dominant individual skill set advantage? Obviously, that's Bia Mosquita. Um, so I think that Bia being like that much of a favorite is discouraging. It's kind of a bit of a disservice to her too, honestly. Bia by sub is plus 100. By decision is plus 225. And I think that you could, because Monse has never had any of her fights, win or lose, end inside the distance. So if you add Bia by decision with submission for a method of victory double chance, I think you actually get a surprisingly good number on that for her being a minus 800 favorite. That's where I overwhelmingly think, like, how I overwhelmingly think this fight will probably play out is Bia's able to get her down. I don't know if Monse is going to be able to get up, and I don't know if she'll be able to survive when she's down there against an absolute world class jiu-jitsu athlete. But if we're gonna say, like, give some credence to Montserrat Rendon, by decision is plus 625, and by split decision is plus 1500. I do think that's worth a look, considering her track record of being hard to take down, being in close fights. I think that, maybe she gets maybe she gets some takedowns of her own, which would be, really playing with fire. But I think I could see a split decision happening with Montserrat doing a little bit more standing up, Bia getting her down to the ground and maybe not being able to do too much with it. And the judges having different ways that they look at it. So Montserrat by decision plus 625 is not that bad, and by split decision plus 1500 not that bad either. But yeah, my favorite play here probably going to be by decision or submission, method of victory double chance. I think you end up getting a pretty good number on that. Next up, we've got a middleweight matchup between Brad Tavares and Eric Anders. Yeah, so Brad, this is a very closely handicapped fight, one of the few on this card. Tavares minus 115, the slight favorite. Anders minus 105, the slight underdog. Well, let's talk about Eric Anders first, the former Alabama Crimson Tide football player. Actually has won two of his last three dating back to March of 2024. He's won three of his last five. One of those wins is over Kyle Dawkins, the old, 1.0 version of Kyle Dawkins, but still. This guy was born in 1987. He is knocking on the door of 40 years old, and he has been in the UFC only since 2017. That does surprise me. I mean, that's going on a decade. But that fight with Lyoto Machida feels like it was way longer ago than February of 2018. This guy's fought a lot of good guys at 205 and 185 pounds. But his last three fights, March of 2024, he beats Jamie Pickett by unanimous decision. And barely. He got knocked down by Jamie Pickett. It was 29-28 and 29-27. That's how those three scorecards shook out. You know how I feel about Jamie Pickett. He might be a very nice guy, but it was not a good run in the UFC. So the win over him and barely beating him was a big tell for me. Like, that's why I favored Chris Weidman going into that fight, but he ends up knocking out Chris Weidman, who, is actually older than Eric Anders by a few years. So that should have also been something I should have looked at. Chris Weidman had a knockdown in that fight. I believe there was some eye poking action, something like that. I know Weidman poked an eye when he fought Bruno Silva. I know there was some eye poking consistently. But Eric Anders is coming off a first round knockout loss to Christian Leroy Duncan. Not a way you want to lose when you're knocking on the door of 40. Now, Brad Tavares, speaking of someone who's been in the UFC for a long time, this guy was born in 1987. He's actually about 8 months younger than Eric Anders, but he has been in the UFC since June of 2010.
I want to tell me what you see. Let's go ahead and see by the fight what you saw in the ring.
Has obviously collected some really nice names along the way. So many UFC fights. It has not gone well over the last, about 4 years now since UFC 276. because he fought Israel Adesanya, lost, got knocked out by Edmund Shabazian, bounced back, beating Antonio Carlos Jr. and Omar Akhmadov. But then, he had to fight some good fighters, but he has now lost 5 of his last 7 fights. Lost to Dricus du Plessis. Hey, no shame there. Got knocked out by Bruno Silva. No shame there. Beats Chris Weidman, gets knocked out by RoboCop, loses a split decision to Jung Young Park. Beat Gerald Mearshart, a fight I was very disappointed with Gerald Mearshart in, but credit to Brad Tavares. It wasn't a particularly exciting fight, but he outstruck Gerald. Didn't end up, getting taken down. He survived all of Mearshart's 8 takedown attempts, got controlled for about 5 minutes, but not in a meaningful way, and ends up getting a 29-28 victory across the board. He's coming off a third round knockout loss to Robert Bricek, who had just recently made his way over to the UFC. So this is I hate picking this fight. You're trying to pick who is less past their prime, or more, whatever. For two guys, both born in 1987, who have had a ton of fights in the UFC, they've had their share of damage. Um, I mean, I have to lean ever so slightly towards Brad Tavares. I think the fights he's had have been higher quality of late. Like beating Gerald Mearshart gives me a little something to work with. Only losing by split decision to the Iron Turtle gives me a little something to work with. Getting knocked out by Robert Bricek, we'll call that a wash with Eric Anders getting knocked out by Christian Leroy Duncan. They both got knocked out recently. Tavares, a little bit younger, but has more mileage on him in terms of time in the UFC. But, Eric Anders played very high level college football. So it's not like he was a pristine microchip coming into mixed martial arts. For all those reasons, I'll go with the guy that, even though Tavares has actually lost more over, the last few years, what he's actually done and beating Chris Weidman, but maybe at a slightly more meaningful time to do so. Um, I guess Weidman had beaten Bruno Silva right before he fought Eric Anders, but Weidman was, you know, more than a year younger when he fought Brad Tavares. So I'll give Tavares the credit on that. Not going crazy with this one. If I am betting this, let's say Tavares money line -115, hit it. Tavares is cheap in DFS. It ended up working conveniently. I have him in one of my lineups, which I'll show off here at the end. Oh, that's a tough one. Of course, that's one of the few closely handicapped fights. Next up, we got a lightweight matchup between Balaji Oki and Manuel Sousa. Oki is the +230 underdog. Sousa the -270 favorite. Let's talk about Balaji Oki first, the underdog here. Born in 1995. Counting the Contender Series, he has won 3 out of 5 fights at the UFC level. Beat Timmy Kawamba by split decision. Got a knockout against Dylan Salvador on the Contender Series. Won a unanimous decision in a high-volume fight with Michael Aswell. Michael Aswell, because people will give Oki shit for looking fatigued as that fight went on. In a fight that, Aswell really isn't a lightweight. Michael Aswell, former guest on this show, love Michael Aswell. He's really more of a featherweight, but what he can do is, he has a good motor. He throws good volume, especially with his hands. He boxes well, and he forces volume out of you. I would, challenge a lot of people to not look tired by the end of a fight with Michael Aswell. Now, Oki is coming off a second-round knockout loss to Mason Jones in a fight where got taken down a couple of times, controlled for a little less than 4 minutes. But he landed a knockdown of his own in that fight against Mason Jones. The other loss was by guillotine to Chris Duncan back in September of 2024. Manuel Sousa, coming off the Contender Series knockout over Christian Perez, August of 2025. He did get taken down 3 times in that fight and controlled for nearly 8 minutes. I don't exactly know how that fight would have gone had it ended up going to the judges. But just a little more background on the 13-1 Manuel Manumitu Sousa. 28 years old, 8 wins by knockout, 3 by submission, 2 by decision, 1-1 in Bellator, 1-0 in LFA, 1-0 in PFL, and 1-0 in the Contender Series. His only loss is to Archie Colgan by unanimous decision. Beat Tim Wild in Bellator. The win in PFL was technically PFL Challenger Series. He was 2-0 in Cage Fury. Look, I do not dispute that Manuel Sousa has a really good resume and all the promotions that he's won in. 8 of his 13 wins are by knockout, 11 of his 13 wins are inside the distance. But where I do think there is an opening here, like Oki, one of his, his one of his more both of his recent losses are inside the distance. The most recent loss is by TKO knockout. I think that Sousa at minus 270, inside the distance is plus 105. I don't hate that at all. But Oki as an underdog play here, plus 230, like that I do like. I think Oki has good power. I think he's fought some really tough people. Um, he can wrestle if need be, and I think that's going to be very important against Manuel Sousa. Oki is just taking kind of a hard rap for the losses he has taken and didn't get enough credit for the win against Michael Aswell. Sousa has a very impressive resume, but it's always an adjustment coming off of the Contender Series at 28 years old. And like Archie Colgan, that is I don't know how to compare that to a guy like Oki in the UFC. Who the hell knows? So yeah, I love people that have LFA, CFFC, Bellator, and PFL experience coming into the UFC. But what Christian Perez was able to achieve against Sousa on the Contender Series is maybe where there should be some concern. And I think Oki can really well handle himself standing up, in spite of the losses he's taken. And so I think he's a good value at what I said, plus 230. Plus 230. Yeah. So, if you're going Sousa, I think inside the distance plus 105 is a good deal. But I think Oki money line plus 230 is where I'm going. And I think he's a good value in DFS. Hit it. Next up, we have a bantamweight matchup between Elijah Smith and Su Young Yu. Su Young Yu is the. How can I not find it? Plus 225 underdog. Elijah Smith, the minus 265 favorite. So, Su Young Yu, nicknamed Yu Jitsu, one of the best nicknames in the game, has not lost in the road to UFC/UFC level. So he's 16-3 as a professional, born in 1995. And all of those wins, by the way, have been by decision. One split decision, but he beat Shohei Nose, Daramisi, Zawupasi, Biergang, Gialaisi. And then that last one was like his actual UFC debut, November of 2024. I actually think that was the Road to UFC finale. Yeah, the bantamweight tournament title. And then he beat AJ Cunningham by unanimous decision. Only, the striking was 18-16 in that fight. He landed 5 takedowns, about 8 minutes of control time, 5 of his 10 takedown attempts. And then beat Zhao Long by unanimous decision August of last year, 29-28 on all 3 judges' scorecards. He got outstruck 68-58. He tried 6 takedowns. None of them were successful. He ended up with 7 seconds of control time. And, that's when I could see people disagreeing with that particular decision. Zhao Long is coming off, losing a pretty competitive fight there, where there was multiple low blows from Zhao Long against Cody Garbrandt just this past weekend. So, Su Young Yu, what's he good at? Getting people down, holding some people there, not landing a ton of strikes. Jiu-jitsu, he is good at jujitsu, but has yet to submit anybody in the road to UFC through the UFC. In fact, he has 5 wins by submission, 8 by decision, 3 by knockout. Both two of his losses are by decision in his career. Only one finish, and that was for the NYSA FC Bantamweight Championship against Dostan Amangeldi back in December of 2023. So, I trust his previous professional record enough. He's been in UAE Warriors, Pancrase, TFC, Black Combat. He won their catchweight title. He was the NYSA FC bantamweight champion at one point. He was the deep bantamweight champion back in September of 2023. Now Elijah Swift Smith, 9-1 as a professional, 23 years old. 5'9" with a 71-inch reach. That means he will be 3 inches taller with a 6-inch reach advantage over Jiu-Jitsu. And Elijah Smith, his only loss as a pro came back in March of 2023. And by the way, he was 20 years old at the time. And it was to Reyes Cortez and Fury FC, who was 6-2 at the time. Not a bad loss. He's been an amateur champion with Colorado Combat Club. 5 wins by knockout, 1 by submission, 3 by decision. His only career loss was that 1 by knockout when he was 20 years old to Reyes Cortez. Elijah Smith is an athlete. He's explosive. He's young, and so naturally improving exponentially with each fight. Doesn't mean there's not going to still be holes or, maybe some IQ gaps in the game, as he gets more experience and as he gets older. But the time he spent in Fury FC was very valuable too. And, after Fury FC, when he hops on the Contender Series, ends up beating Aaron Tall by unanimous decision. And then beats Vince Morales by unanimous decision. Knockout slams Toshiomi Kazama back in August of 2025. And how did I say you has lost his fights? 1 knockout, 2 decision. And Elijah Smith won 3 fights by decision. 2 actually out of his last 3 fights he won by decision. Yeah, so I favor Elijah Smith here. I think he's going to be difficult to take down. I think he will be harder to hold there. Vince Morales landed 2 takedowns, and they had Elijah Smith landed 3 in that fight. They ended up with almost even control time. Elijah Smith, his strikes are going to be more valuable. They're going to be, everything he does other than a submission attempt on the ground. And, that's going to be more likely to put an end to this fight or to do meaningful damage. And so if Jiu-Jitsu can't get Elijah Smith down and hold him there for, at least 2 of the 3 rounds, he's going to be in serious danger. Give me Elijah Smith so Smith by decision is plus 120. Smith by knockout is plus 385. I like that method of victory double chance pairing as well. I think if you're going Su Young Yu, I think you go by decision. That's plus 240. You do by decision and then by submission. That's plus 900. So you actually get a better number on that for a guy nicknamed Jiu-Jitsu if you do a method of victory double chance there. But I feel good about Elijah Smith at 23 years old. I think that, the physical components to make him a great fighter are definitely there. And so now we're just looking to see growth from him with each and every fight, whether it's a win or a loss. Next up, we have a heavyweight matchup between Vitor Petrino and Steven Asplund. Steven Asplund is the plus 180 underdog. Vitor Petrino, the minus 210 favorite. Now, Petrino looking real cut and juice this week. I know people tend to get excited about that. And Petrino's now won 2 in a row since moving to heavyweight. So he beat Thomas Peterson by 3rd round knockout. He submitted Austin Lane by rear naked choke. Those fights both came within a few months of each other back in 2025. Before then, he was on a two-fight losing streak, getting finished both by Anthony Smith and Dustin Jacoby as he, kind of moved his way up the light heavyweight division. He had beaten Marcin Prachnio and Modestas Bukauskas and Tyson Pedro. Of all things, had to beat Tyson Pedro by decision. But, called it a day at light heavyweight and now is making his way up the heavyweight rankings, which, there's an easier and a more clear path up the heavyweight rankings. But what happens when you actually do that is maybe the bigger question. 6'2", 77-inch reach, born in 1997. Now, Steven Asplund, 78-inch reach. He is 3 inches taller, and he was born in 1998. Steven Asplund knocked out Anthony Gracio on the Contender Series very quickly, if you'll recall, September 2025, and then bounces back and gets a second round knockout over Sean Sharaf, landing 170 strikes en route to that victory in December on the last card of the UFC's calendar year there. And Asplund, I respect what he has done, before coming to the UFC. That's not always the case with heavyweights that they're getting out of the United States. Asplund has won 6 fights by knockout, 1 by decision. His only career loss was by submission, 4-1 in LFA. His only loss was, now, like 1.5 years ago to Denzel Freeman. Denzel Freeman, who, despite some bad appearances or some snoozers in the UFC, getting finished via middle finger against Josh Hokett. He is a good wrestler. He is a good grappler. And so it's not a huge knock to say that Steven Asplund got out-wrestled and out-grappled by Denzel Freeman, almost 2 years ago. But, he also finished Raiden Kovacs, Hammer Morton in LFA, Larry Gonzalez, and Billy Ray Valdez. Those are important names that he beat early in his career. Was a several-time amateur champion. He's gone the distance several times, as a big heavyweight. That's important. Steven Asplund as a heavyweight throws so much at you, and it's well-calculated stuff. Vitor Petrino, powerful, 8 of those career 13 wins are by knockout. He did get a submission against Austin Lane, but that's not super important. He did submit Marcin Prachnio. Maybe a submission for Petrino is on the table. I think it'll be hard, if he wants to get Asplund to the ground. I just think that Vitor Petrino is going to be looking for big shots. And I think while that's happening, I think Steven Asplund is going to be racking up more damage than Vitor Petrino even realizes in the moment. Steven Asplund is a big dude, and he's young and improving. And, a loss to a UFC caliber fighter in LFA a year and a half ago being the only blemish on your record, that is not a bad thing to say about a guy. Steven Asplund is one of the younger dudes that has made their way into the UFC recently that there is some good upward trajectory for. Vitor Petrino to win this fight inside the distance, or I don't love too many props for Vitor Petrino, but if I was gonna say one, I would say inside the distance. And for Petrino, that is -115. Doesn't really get me off the couch too much. But Steven Asplund, who I've seen as high as +210, money line +180, absolutely hit it. I'm definitely rooting for Steven Asplund more. I think, Vitor Petrino isn't old either. I would like to see both these guys, continue making their way up the heavyweight rankings, and like to see some people disappear from those heavyweight rankings as people near the age of 40 start to retire. You would like to eventually see. But yeah, Asplund, Hokett, those are guys that can make their way, up. As far as what we've seen so far, Walter Walker too, but what everybody's waiting for is Gable Stevenson's arrival in the UFC. That is going to be someone who, Asplund, Hokett, they can certainly make their way up and get to big fights. I never say no, for someone at their age, whether they have championship potential in a division that is not doing well right now. But Gable Stevenson's the one that everybody's waiting for to see How quickly can this guy rise? Is he for real? Is he a potential future UFC champion? From what we've seen so far, you got to say that all those are possibilities. Next up, we've got a welterweight matchup between Chris the Action Man Curtis and Mike Beck. Oral By is the minus 330 favorite. The Action Man, the plus 270 underdog. Let's talk about the Action Man first. I've had a lot to say about the Action Man over the years. Interesting career this dude has had. Before he was on the Contender Series the first time, he thought that the UFC had blackballed him, swore him off, didn't want him to be a part of whatever. I know he had tried out for the Ultimate Fighter, many years back. And, had that night where he fought twice in PFL, lost twice in the same night, came in as like a late replacement alternate after losing, retired twice in the same evening. Obviously, that retirement did not hold because then he came to the UFC, had a few straight upsets over Phil Hawes and Brendan Allen. And then it's, just been kind of consistent, like took a step up at middleweight, lost to Jack Hermanson. I guess thought he won or was mad that Jack Hermanson beat him thoroughly. Um, if you're not standing right in front of him, willingly accepting one of his bigger punches, he thinks you're running. So that was what happened with Hermanson at the end of the fight. He did finish Joaquin Buckley. That one was at middleweight, where Buckley is just not the same dude. Lost to Kelvin Gastelum, had that no contest in the fight with Imavov that he was on his way to losing. You can't say for sure if the fight didn't, come to a natural end. Wins a split decision over MAB January 2024. He's now lost two of his last three fights, one by split decision to Brendan Allen in their rematch, April of 2024, in the Fight Night main event. Got knocked out by Roman Kopylov, a fight he was going to lose if it went the distance, but it ended up getting stopped with a second to go. Kind of a lame stoppage, but whatever. And then coming off a split decision win over Max Griffin. He's so at welterweight. Chris Curtis is at this stage in his career. This is probably where he needs to be. That fight with Max Griffin, he ended up winning 29-28 on two of the judges' scorecards. Max Griffin, by the way, almost 40. He'll be 40 next. Wait. No, he's 41. I forget. It's 2026. Max Griffin at the time was about to turn 40. Chris Curtis, born in July 1987, no spring chicken himself. So welterweight's the home moving for Chris Curtis. Now, Oral By, love this guy, born in 1998. They're both the same height, pretty much have the same reach. So Oral By is almost a decade, over a decade younger than the Action Man. He has won 4 of his last 5 fights, all not even in the Contender Series, all UFC stuff. Submitted Eros Medic by neck crank, beat Elvis Brenner by unanimous decision. Lost that banger of a fight against Matus Rebecki where they each spilled about 3 gallons of blood in there. That was a split decision, very close. And then submits Tafik Musayev, who had come over from who had a nice career in Rise and in Bellator. Submitted him June of 2025, and then knocked out Jack Hermanson November of 2025. So, very, and by the way, Tafik Musayev, who I'm rooting for to at least get a win or two in the UFC, is fighting Ignacio Bahamondes later this month at UFC Fight Night, Adesanya versus Pfeiffer. So, Oral By at welterweight. So he fought Hermanson at welterweight, which is interesting. There was not an advisable move down for Jack Hermanson either way. The Messiah fight was catchweight. Rebecki was actually a catchweight fight against Elvis Brenner. It was lightweight against Eros Medic. It was welterweight. Oral By has fought at every weight that is physically available to him, and he's 15-2-1 as a result. Out of Kyrgyzstan, 3-0 in LFA. Everything about this dude was legit coming into the UFC, and only the one one pre-UFC loss to Khalid Satuev at ACA Young Eagles back in December of 2020. I love Oral By. 13 of his career 15 wins are inside the distance. He's on a great run in the UFC where you don't even, how much do you even take away from him for the Rebecca fight? Like, Rebecca's an animal for being able to come back in that fight. They're both animals for being able to spill that much blood, and it's a fight that you could have argued that he won. Chris Curtis is coming off barely beating a 40-year-old Max Griffin in his welterweight debut. Um, Chris Curtis isn't getting any younger. And what's the route to victory here for Chris Curtis? It's going to be, boxing. It's going to be really hard to knock out Orobai. It's going to be hard to consistently outbox him over the course of 3 rounds and not get taken down and out grappled. Orobai has so many other, routes to victory here. So I have to say, like, Orobai to win this one inside the distance. Um, that is plus 160. I just think that's a really good one. And then Orobai to cover -3.5, minus 140. I think that is certainly one to look for. Orobai total takedowns over 2.5 is minus 130. And, he didn't have to get a takedown over Jack Hermanson because he knocked him out so quick. I don't think that's how the Curtis fight plays out. He got 3 takedowns against Messiah before submitting him in the first round. 2 against Rebecca in that fight, but 5 takedowns against Elvis Brenner. Orobai got 7 takedowns against Uros Medic. Chris Curtis, the person that's been able to, he's been taken down 3 times by Imavov, 6 times by Brennan Allen. It hasn't been too many times that people are able to take him down, but people that are able to take him down are able to do it with a decent number. So I think like over 2.5 takedowns for Orobai minus 130. That's one to look at too. Chris Curtis, I think if you're going like, if you're picking Chris Curtis, I think you go by decision. I think it would have to be a close fight where Orobai struggles to get him down. I know Chris Curtis can wrestle all right. He's a strong dude. He'll be strong at welterweight. But Orobai is going to be really hard to knock out. And for like Chris Curtis, it would have to be like outboxing him and not ending up on the ground too much and getting absolutely smothered with the grappling of Orobai. So if you're going Curtis, it's by decision or even by split decision plus 1,300 isn't too bad. Yeah. The action man. Let's see how he reacts in the later moments in the aftermath of this fight. Hard to think that you want to fight if you did get finished. But either way, even if this is nearing the end for the action man, it was very impressive that he was able to get, to the UFC after so many ups and downs in his career, made his way up the middleweight rankings with some nice upsets. So, overall, the story of Chris the Action Man Curtis's career turns into a good story, I think, regardless of how this UFC tenure ends. Next up, we have an awesome flyweight matchup between Charles Johnson and Bruno Silva.
Oh God, take care of your underwears. I'm gonna you, man.
This is a pretty closely handicapped fight, too. We got Charles Johnson, the minus 160 favorite, Bruno Silva, the plus 140 underdog. Let's talk about Bruno Silva, the underdog first. All right. I like Bruno Silva as a fighter in total. Okay. So you can poke some holes in because he started off his UFC tenure with a no contest and 2 straight losses. Those losses were to David Dvorak and Tajiro Lembekov almost 6 years ago. And then he won 4 in a row. Beat JP Baez, knocked him out. Beat Victor Rodriguez, knocked him out. Beat Tyson Nam and submitted him. Okay, that's one. And then you knock out Cody Durden. And especially July 2024, even, not even 2 years ago, that was a lot more meaningful. And then, why was he on a 2-fight losing streak? Why were people down on him? Because he got knocked out in 2 straight fights against who? Starboy Cape and Joshua Van. And frankly, like he showed a lot of toughness to survive as long as he did before getting finished in those 3rd rounds. So I'm not going to hold it against Bruno Silva that much for losing to Van, who's currently the UFC flyweight champion, and Starboy, a guy who very well could challenge for that title in 2026. He's coming off a rear naked choke win over Hyung Sung Park, October of 2025. Park, had the fast rise, ended up getting a main event way too early against Tatsuro Taira, got the octagon floor mopped with his face by Tatsuro Taira, bounces back just a little too fast, and ends up getting submitted by Bruno Silva. So Bruno Silva back in the win column. Charles Johnson is 5 inches taller. He will have a 5 inch reach advantage. All right. What's the thing about Charles Johnson? Okay. Let's just go back a little bit. He's been an active dude. So he had those 3 straight losses to Ode Osborne, Cody Durden, and Rafael Estevan, where Cody Durden was able to get a lot of takedowns. Estevan got 3 takedowns. Osborne got 3 takedowns. That was the issue there. Rattles up 4 in a row, beating Azit Maxim, Jake Hadley, Joshua Van by knockout, then Sumata Harry, and then loses by unanimous decision to Ramazan Timarov, March of 2025. Then knocks out Loner Kavanaugh, August of 2025. Started the whole joke that if you want to be a prospect that, with championship potential at flyweight, you have to get knocked out by Charles Johnson first. But he's coming off a first-round knockout loss to Alex Perez. So, Timarov, he's got a true future. I think that, even though, it's not like he's uber young, but he is, certainly has a lot of room to grow at flyweight. The Alex Perez loss, that was Alex Perez's second win in 7 fights since November of 2020. And Alex Perez absolutely pieced Charles Johnson up. Charles Johnson gets up to fight prospects, and he definitely gets up to fight people that he is like, just kind of like a tier kind of above. Flick, Maxim, Hadley, Sumata Harry, just a tick above those dudes, and he gets up to fight the prospects. And he's so good with his hands, and he's been in so many good fights, in his time in the UFC. He's a real challenge for young prospects who don't have a lot of big fight experience in the UFC. Bruno Silva is kind of falls in a little bit of a gray area between those. He's not a prospect, so he doesn't fall in a gray area, but he's not exactly Alex Perez, and he's not exactly Ramazan Timarov, but he's certainly, kind of pretty close to dudes like Estevam and Durden and Osborne, just in overall quality. Silva got 5 takedowns against Young Sung Park. He hasn't been a big takedown guy in the UFC. He got 4 against Tajir, 3 against David Dvorak, 2 against Khalid Taha. Takedowns are a real possibility here, and the grappling of Bruno Silva is going to be important. But Bruno Silva can get in the pocket and can survive hard shots, even when they're thrown at high volume, and he can throw some back in his own right as well. I think he can hold his own on his feet. I think that if he can utilize his wrestling and his grappling, then he could, start to pull away a little bit more in this one. I see the value of Charles Johnson by knockout or decision. I see the value of it, but I'm going Bruno Silva money line plus 140. Hit it. God, I love the flyweight division. And I'll say this for Bruno Silva, even though people were down on you.
Oh God, take care of your underwears. I'm gonna you, man.
Next up, we have a light heavyweight matchup between Ian Kudalaba and Umar Sy. Umar Sy is the minus 275 favorite. Kudalaba the plus 235 underdog. Let's talk about Kudalaba first. Born in 1993, nicknamed the Hulk, 6'1" with a 75-inch reach, 19-11-1 as a professional. So, he's had to fight a lot of tough fighters just in the last handful of years in the UFC. He's technically been in the UFC since 2016. 2 of his first 3 fights that he lost was Misha Serkinov and Jared Cannonier. He lost to Glover Teixeira. He lost 2 brutal fights in a row to Magomed Ankalaev as a sacrificial lamb. A draw with Dustin Jacoby, and so he beat friend of the podcast Devin Clark September of 2021. Since then, he has lost 5 of his last 8 fights. Got finished by Ryan Spann, Johnny Walker, Kennedy Nzechukwu. Lost by unanimous decision to Felipe Lins, who is going to be fighting Francis Ngannou at heavyweight on that Ronda Rousey versus Gina Carano card. and he's coming off a split decision loss to Modestas Bukauskas. He outstruck him 58-44, but actually ended up like there was a 29-28, a 30-27, and then a 30-27 against him or against Bukauskas. So very unusual scoring. It's like the wins that he has had over the last few years that also concern me. Like you finished Tanner Boser at light heavyweight, where Tanner Boser like was always going to have more success, I thought, at heavyweight. Hasn't been in the UFC since August of 2023. I mean, Ivan Erslan by split decision, beat Ibo Aslan by first round arm triangle. Just like not amazing competition that he has been able to beat. All the credit to him for all the tough fighters he has faced. Umar Sy is 3 inches taller. He will have an 8-inch reach advantage. He's actually a couple of years older, 12-1 as a professional, 3-1 in the UFC. Submitted Tuco Tokos, beat Dawon Jung by unanimous decision, and knocked out Brinson Ribeiro September of 2025. His only loss is by unanimous decision against Alonzo Menifield. He outstruck Menifield 34-29. He got a takedown and controlled for 4 minutes of that fight. Still ended up losing 29-28 on all three judges' scorecards to Menifield, who, let's say, at the time was coming off a win against Julius Walker. So, Alonzo Menifield, even though he's starting to push 40, remains dangerous against dudes like that. And Umar Sy, one, he is French. 5 wins by knockout, 4 by submission, 3 by decision. His only career loss is that decision loss to Alonzo Menifield. So has experience in KSW, Aries FC, all the things that you do like to see. It's not like he had like amazing championship level experience there before coming into the UFC, but quality experience nonetheless. And like in the fight with Dawon Jung that did go the distance, he outstruck him 90-29, had 2 takedowns of his 7 attempts, controlled for 3 minutes of the fight, 30-27, all three judges' scorecards. So, like, neither of their wins in the UFC has been amazing. But size dimensions are going to keep Ian Kudalaba from getting him down. Like, Kudalaba's going to try everything to get Umar Sy down. That's going to be difficult. He hasn't been taken down in the UFC. He'll probably look to land some bigger shots. He hasn't won by knockout since he fought Tanner Boser, and that's not like a super frequent. I mean, it used to be like he knocked out Khalil Roundtree, he knocked out Godzimurat Antigolov and Henrique De Silva, but that was now 7 to 9 years ago that those fights happened. So there's more mileage on Kudalaba. His last 2 losses have been by decision. He got finished 3 times in a row here. I would say like I hate trying to pick an outcome for this one, especially like Kudalaba has fights that can go so many different ways because of the Hulkian way that he does fight. Let's check out inside the distance. -110. There's been like Umar Sy isn't those better guys that Kudalaba's fought though. Like I think maybe like by knockout or by decision, because Sy by decision is plus 265. Sy by submission is plus 210, but Sy by knockout is plus 350. So maybe you do method of victory, double chance, Sy by decision or by knockout, and end up getting a pretty good number from that. If you're going Kudalaba, I think you go Kudalaba by decision plus 465. That could end up being a split decision too. It's just going to be hard for Kudalaba to get Sy down. So Kudalaba is going to throw a good amount out there early to try to implement that part of his game. And I don't know what happens if it doesn't work immediately. But I trust the lower odometer for Umar Sy in this one as well. Ian Kutalaba and the wins that he has been able to collect, it's kind of been him hanging on by a thread and hasn't been incredibly active the last few years. When you see that just a few fights ago was Felipe Lins and Tanner Boser, it's kind of a look backward. And you just have been finished by so many of the world's best light heavyweights. That's a tough spot to be in, and that stuff adds up when you fight a 12-1 French dude with 8-inch reach advantage and all that stuff. Oh boy! So Umar Sy will say that.
Oh God, take care of your underwears. I'm gonna you, man.
That's like that's a decent parlay piece, I'd say. Next up, featherweight Marwan Rahiki against Harry Hardwick. Now, Rahiki is the minus 260 favorite. Hardwick the plus 220 underdog. Let's talk about Harry Houdini Hardwick first. 13-4-1 as a professional, 31 years old. 3 wins by knockout, 4 by submission, 6 by decision. 2 losses inside the distance, 2 losses by decision. 1-1 in Bellator. He's a former Cage Warriors featherweight champion. Fought his real UFC debut against Cal Fernandez at lightweight, which was not doing him really any favors. So naturally, like he had a very good run in Cage Warriors. And people are really liking to dump on the Bellator, or not the Bellator, yeah, that too, but the Cage Warriors prospects. It wasn't Harry Hardwick allowed himself to take so many hard leg kicks from Cal Fernandez that the fight was clearly over before it was called in round 1. Cal Fernandez chopped Harry Hardwick's legs into absolute ground beef. And it was nasty to watch. And he was the favorite in that fight. Now apparently he was the plus 170 underdog. I don't remember that being the case, but okay. I'm rooting for Harry Hardwick. I'm rooting for Cage Warriors prospects. I root for prospects. It's silly to be skeptical of prospects from every regional feeder promotion, like some people have tried to be. It's like, where do you think everybody else came from, man? Like, of course, not all prospects, not even most of them, turn out to be amazing. But that's what the term prospect means. So yeah, got his leg absolutely kicked to shit against Cal Fernandez in his UFC debut. Again, that was at lightweight, and that was not ideal for him. This one is at featherweight, and against Marwan Rahiki. Marwan Freaky Rahiki, fantastic nickname. 7-0 as a professional, 23 years old. He will have 5'8" with a 72-inch reach. They're both pretty much the same in size. Rahiki will have a very slight reach advantage. So 6 wins by knockout in his career, 1 win by submission, 3-0 in Hex, 1 on the Contender Series. That was his last fight against Ananias Malumba, October of 2025. Was a champion at Hex Fight Series and Beatdown Promotions. Won both those titles in 2025, the featherweight titles. Actually decent records for the opponents that he fought in this limited professional experience. I have different things to say about Hex, I suppose. I mean, he's finished everybody inside the distance, one way or another. And most of those, 6 of the 7, have been by knockout. That is of concern for Harry Hardwick. He does take damage. I don't know exactly what the route to victory here for Harry Hardwick is. I think he's got plenty of options. But honestly, here, I've picked Rahiki in a few parlays and whatnot because I think that's very well a possibility, especially at 23 years old on his way up. But Hardwick, again, this being a featherweight fight, being in his 30s, taking on a guy who hasn't lost before, who's coming fresh off the Contender Series, still 23 years old. I do not think you can rule out Harry Hardwick. Money line plus 220. I think that is solid. But Rahiki by knockout is probably the single most likely method of victory. That's plus 135. I might play around with some DFS lineups. I've already put two pre-draft one or pre-podcast ones out. Maybe I include Harry Hardwick at a lower price and one or two updated ones. We'll see. It's just like after that first fight, that was like a big slam on the brakes for Harry Hardwick. Cal Fernandez is an animal. Again, not at Hardwick's ideal weight, but he just got his leg chopped to absolute mutton in round one. So it's hard to look at him against a young killer and think that he'll be able to survive 3 rounds, but that's what high level experience and things like Cage Warriors and Bellator and being in your 30s prepares you a little more for, and taking losses, which Rahiki has yet to do at this point. And to Harry Hardwick, I will drop this one.
But I'm not impressed by your performance, and I look forward to.
All right, folks, 3 fights left. We got another featherweight matchup between Andre, worst nickname in the game, Touchy Feely, against Jose Delgado. Jose Delgado here is the minus 400 favorite. Touchy Feely, the plus 330 underdog. Let's talk about Touchy Feely first. He is coming off the split decision win over Christian Rodriguez. He's won 2 of his last 3. The only loss being to Mel Costa. He got submitted in that time, and look what Mel Costa's gone on to do in that time. 2 of his last 4, he got knocked out by Dan Ige. It's like win, loss, win, loss, win, loss, back to September of 2022. And all against a decently comparable level of competition the whole time. As a pro, he's 25-12. He's born in 1990. It's not like he's like super old, but he's been in the UFC since 2013. So, born in 1990. By the time of his birthday this year, he'll be 36. And so he came into the UFC at 23. And it's been a lot of win, loss, win, loss, win, loss. It hasn't been perfect, but there's been a ton of that. It's been rare that there's been, strings of multiple losses or wins in a row. And I think that it is silly to base things purely off of patterns, but over a decent sample size, the fact is some fighters, some athletes and people deal with losses better than others. Some people deal with wins better than others. Some people win, get on a roll, and continue to work on what's working well. They pick up momentum, and, getting a win can be a good thing for them. Some people take it easier after a win. Some people lose and they get discouraged and they don't respond well, and things can get out of hand quickly. Some people lose and it motivates them. They get back, they work on stuff, and they end up getting a win the next time out. Andre Feely appears to maybe not handle wins the best, even though he has had to fight better fighters after getting those wins. But he, deals with losses decently. Jose Delgado, they're pretty much the same size. Delgado, about 8 years younger. 3-1 in the UFC, counting the Contender Series. The first 3 wins were all by knockout of Ernie Juarez, Connor Matthews, and Hyder Emil. He's coming off a unanimous decision loss to Nathaniel Wood, a fight that a lot of people thought that Delgado won. They each had a knockdown. Delgado outstruck him 134-99. He did get taken down twice by Nathaniel Wood. And I think that's going to be I think that was easier for Nathaniel Wood to do than it will be for Andre Feely to do. I am often off about Andre Feely. But one thing that I do think is, like, if he can't take you down, and if he's not going to, win the pure fight that happens with your hands standing up, then I don't know what his route to victory will be. And, quick on Jose Delgado, 10-2 as a pro, 27 years old, 6 wins by knockout, 4 by submission. His only 2 career losses are by decision. He's 1-0 in LFA. The only other loss was to Chris McCate in United Fight League, February of 2023. And, he's been in Tough Enough. Fought Lucas Faria in LFA. Knocking out Hyder Emil is nothing to sneeze at. Andre Feely, just as far as like how he's lost, like his more recent ones, like got subbed, got knocked out, lost the decision to Nathaniel Wood. That tends to be how that happens. I don't know, like Delgado. Delgado hasn't had. He had two straight submissions against opponents with a combined 7-9 record. Um, November 2023 to February 2024. But then it was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 straight knockouts, and the decision lost to Nathaniel Wood. I don't know if it's a submission for Jose Delgado this time. Mel Costa is the last guy to submit Andre Feely. And before that, you'd have to go back to Fredo Pepe, who submitted Andre Feely March of 2015. Max Holloway also submitted him in 2014. Fun. But recencies suggest much more that if Andre Feely loses, it's by decision or by knockout. So, method of victory, double chance. Delgado by knockout is -110. Delgado by decision is +400. I think you could take Delgado maybe to cover 3.5. That's -200. So, Delgado, say, most takedowns landed. Feely is -130. I suppose that makes sense on recent track record. He's more likely to be more desperate for a takedown in the fight. Delgado total significant strikes 49.5. I definitely think that he could get there on Andre Feely. Cub Swanson did it. Christian Rodriguez landed 83. Algeo landed 81 in a fight that Feely won. So prop bet Delgado over 49.5 strikes. The only concern is, does he knock out Andre Feely before he hits 50 is the question. Feely total takedowns over half a takedown. I would say -130 is a good number there. If you're going Andre Feely, I think you go Feely by decision +500. That's not horrible. But I'm not feeling touchy-feely here this weekend.
Oh God, take care of your underwears. I'm gonna you, man.
Next up, we are to the co-main event of the evening. We have a women's strawweight match between Amanda Lemos and Jillian Robertson. And Jesus Christ, can we have a couple of 10 to 12 fight cards? I love a lot of fights. 14 fights is awesome, but Jesus Christ, going through these episodes every week, it's 14 fights. It is a grind. Anyway, Lemos, Robertson. Lemos is +170. Robertson, the -200 favorite. Let's talk about Amanda Lemos first. Winner of, has lost 3 of her last 5. One of those wins, February 2024, was a unanimous decision win over Mackenzie Dern, who is now your UFC strawweight champion. Beat Eisman Lucindo in an underwhelming fight at UFC 313, outstruck her 12-4 with 3 takedowns to 1. The losses in that stretch of time, because she was also coming off 2 straight wins over Michelle Waterson Gomez and Marina Rodriguez before she fought Zhang Weili for the title at UFC 292. Got absolutely decimated, but that's what happens when you fight Zhang Weili. She got subbed by Virna Jandiroba, and she lost most recently by unanimous decision to Tatiana Suarez. She outstruck Suarez 23-20. Got controlled for almost 10 minutes of the fight. Only allowed 3 takedowns on Suarez's 12 attempts, though. So that's something to consider. And the only other people to beat Amanda Lemos since 2017 in the UFC are Jessica Andrade and Leslie Smith. She's beaten Angela Hill and the other names that I said here. Lemos is pushing 40 years old, and Jillian Robertson somehow be at a 2-inch reach disadvantage. She is an inch taller. Born in May 1995, she has now won 4 fights in a row. She's won 6 fights out of her last 7. When it wasn't the strongest start to her UFC career. She's actually had a ton of UFC fights since December of 2017 when she debuted. Picked up a lot of wins that aren't awesome quality. It was, for a while there where every time she would take a step up, she would end up taking a step back and lost those two straight to Tyler Santos and Miranda Maverick, took a loss to JJ Aldrich. But now she submitted Maria Agapova. She submitted Piera Rodriguez, dropped a decision to Tabitha Ricci June of 2023, got taken down 3 times and outstruck in that fight. It was 30-27 on one judge's scorecard, 29-28 on the other two. Now she's won 4 in a row. She finished Poliana Viana. She beat Michelle Waterson Gomez by unanimous decision. She beat Luana Pinero by unanimous decision, taking her down 5 times, then took down Marina Rodriguez twice, ended up finishing her in the second round. You know what hasn't happened to Amanda Lemos has been submitted, so that's obviously something to look out for. Like an arm bar, Jessica Andrade got her in an arm triangle. Her only knockout loss in the UFC was to Leslie Smith in her debut almost 9 years ago. Zhang Weili didn't finish her. Tatiana Suarez wasn't able to finish her. She was able to out wrestle her, but only landed 25% of her takedowns. I think, like, here, you either think Lemos has taken quite a step back, has lost 2 of her last 3 now, and, that fight where she beat current strawweight champion Mackenzie Dern is now very well in the rear view. That was now over 2 years ago, before UFC 300. And that Lemos is kind of primed here to be finished, but, like, it's going to be hard for Jillian Robertson to get Amanda Lemos down. Jillian Robertson gets people down, but, like, she's not, it's not like you think about her like she's an amazing wrestler. She gets takedowns, but it's going to be hard against Amanda Lemos. But she's younger, she's gained confidence, especially beating Marina Rodriguez. I think, like, pick your spot here. Keep an eye on Amanda Lemos. I think for all the reasons like that, she didn't get finished against Zhang Weili, for the reasons that it was a close fight with Tatiana Suarez, the fact that she was able to beat Mackenzie Dern just 2 years ago, knocked her down, outstruck her, took her down 2-1. Obviously, didn't get submitted against Mackenzie Dern. Jillian Robertson inside the distance, you're getting it plus 180. I think that's a good value. But otherwise, like, it's either that or it's like Lemos money line, probably like decision. That's plus 250. Money line's plus 170. Keep an eye on the money line and see if that gets any better. But, Jillian Robertson, if you're not careful, Jillian Robertson is just one person that you're just not even sure yet, this many fights into her UFC career, if there is a proverbial hump she'll get over. But this represents like her next opportunity, and this is one of the bigger ones. Amanda Lemos, this is the tail end of her career, and this one is within her reach though. Difficulty wise, this is definitely somewhere in between Lucindo, Dern, and Suarez. It's doable. But if she gets taken down to the ground, I don't know how confident I am that she gets up. And Jillian Robertson is good at dealing out damage in one way or another when she gets people in a good position. All right, folks, we are now to the main event of the evening. We have a featherweight matchup between Josh Emmett and Kevin Vallejos. Kevin Vallejos is the minus 550 favorite. Josh Emmett, the plus 400 underdog. Let's talk about the plus 400 underdog, Josh Emmett, first. He is now 41 years old. He has lost 4 of his last 5 fights. Granted, to Yair Rodriguez, Ilya Taporia, who wasn't able to finish him of all things. Lerone Murphy and Yusuf Zalal. His one win in that stretch was the absolutely otherworldly knockout of Bryce Mitchell.
Oh God, take care of your underwears. I'm gonna you, man.
And then you got to go back to 2019 through 2022 when he was on that 5-fight winning streak over Michael Johnson, Mirsad Bektic, Shane Burgos, Dan Ige, and Calvin Kattar. Josh Emmett has been in the UFC since 2016, fought many of the world's best featherweights, put on many a banger. That fight with Shane Burgos was legendary stuff. That was during the pandemic. in the fight with Calvin Kattar, vintage Emmett decision win. Even getting outstruck in volume, but those strikes, have power. The power is not gone from Josh Emmett. I do not deny that. But against Yusuf Zalal, it was just so fast, the decimation. Lerone Murphy isn't a finisher, so it's not super expected that he would have finished Josh Emmett. Emmett got 4 takedowns in that fight. He got outstruck 84-41. It's 49-46 on one scorecard, 48-47 on the other two. Emmett had 3 minutes and 40 seconds of control time. And, got beat bad by Ilia Topuria, submitted by Yair Rodriguez in the fight that was for the interim featherweight title. So, when it's main events, when it's bigger fights, and Josh Emmett does take a step up, like Kattar, Ige, Burgos, Johnson, Mitchell, all within the realm of Josh Emmett at his peak. And now he's 41 years old. We're in another main event, and you could not be taking on a dude with, a great personality, 17-1 as a professional, born in 2001. He will be at a 2-inch reach disadvantage. He's 1 inch shorter. But Kevin Vallejos.
Oh, God. Take care of your underwears. I'm gonna you, man.
What's his only? By the way, Kevin Vallejos, a dude that has held regional titles for Samurai Fight House at like 3 different weight classes. I think it was like bantamweight, featherweight, and lightweight. 12 wins by knockout, 2 by submission, 3 by decision. His only loss as a professional by decision in the Contender Series to Gian Silva, September of 2023. Like 2.5 years ago. Got outstruck 87-71, did get taken down once. The control time was not very meaningful. 29-28 on all 3 judges' scorecards against Gian Silva, who, he's 17-3. His only loss in the UFC was to Diego Lopez. He's coming off a win over Arnold Allen, knocked out Bryce Mitchell, beat Drew Dober and Charles Jourdain. So the loss to Gian Silva by decision, a close fight on the Contender Series. Okay. Vallejos, at his age, 21 years old, has so much room to go upward in the UFC featherweight division. Knocks out Cam Teague in his second Contender Series appearance. Parlays that into fighting Sungwoo Choi. March of 2025, knocks him out in the first round. Then fights Danny Silva. Beats him by unanimous decision, outstriking him 90-69 with 2 takedowns to 1. Danny Silva, who, Danny Silva, before that, had won on the Contender Series and was 2-0 in the UFC with split decision wins over Josh Kulabau and Lucas Almeida. And now, most importantly, he's coming off a spinning back fist knockout finish December 13th, 2025 against Giga Chikadze. Look, folks, I don't know exactly how this fight ends. I know I don't think that this ends up being a submission for Kevin Vallejos. The last submission that he had was in December 2023, defending the Samurai Fight House featherweight title. And then you have to go back another, year plus, just a few fights into his professional career to find his other one of 2 career submissions. For Josh Emmett, like Lerone Murphy, Ilia Topuria wasn't able to finish him. Yusuf Zalal and Yair Rodriguez are much more of submission wizards. It's not really on the table here for Vallejos. And I think that the single most likely outcome is probably, Emmett hasn't even been knocked out in this, losing stretch. The last time he was knocked out was Jeremy Stevens, February 2018. And in fact, how many times has he been knocked out of his 6 professional losses? Once. So it is hard to say that Vallejos gets the knockout. They have 5 rounds to work with. Of course, this is the oldest Josh Emmett has ever been in the octagon. So I think, Vallejos to end up winning a decision is plus 200. The knockout is minus 110. I have no problem with this method of victory double chance either. And over the course of 5 rounds, can Kevin Vallejos cover minus 5.5? That's minus 325. Whatever. No, sir. significant strikes landed, most significant strikes landed, Vallejos is minus 500. Vallejos total significant strikes over under 70.5. I think he goes over because I do think that you're going to have to batter Josh Emmett to knock him out. And, I think that'll at least take a few rounds. And Vallejos throws really good volume. Minus 135 for to hit 71 or more significant strikes, I think is, a pretty good number to get. Josh Emmett total takedowns over half is minus 115. That's one to look at too. But Vallejos, I love him in DFS. Method of victory, double chance by knockout or decision, whatever number you get. If you take it straight up, you throw it together with a couple of other ones. I think that's the way to go here for this main event. And hopefully this is the next step in the growth and the saga of Kevin El Chino Vallejos. Possibly the swan song here for Josh Emmett going out, maybe with a main event. Again, being 41 years old, how much longer can you do it at the UFC level, especially against a dude born in 2001 that is murdering people like Giga Chikadze? Folks, that is all 14 fights of UFC Vegas 114. I am going to share with you my DraftKings lineups that I have so far, and then I'll build one before we get out of here. Lineups, the first one, Umar Sy, Kevin Vallejo. I'll share my screen now. There we go. Umar Sy, Kevin Vallejos, Pelagioki, Stephen Asplin, Jose Delgado, Brad Tavares. Kevin Vallejo, and there was $0 remaining on that one. Second lineup, Kevin Vallejos, Sam Hughes, Bruno Silva. Forgetting, is it Elijah? Yeah, Elijah Smith, Stephen Asplin, Jose Delgado. I had $100 remaining on that one. I will build one more. So let's say on this one, let's go Harry Hardwick 7,000. Let's go Asplin 7,200. Now I have a lot to work with. Let's go Vallejos 9,600. Let's go Oralby 9,100. Let's go Elijah Smith 8,500. And let's get Jillian Robertson 8,600. Harry Hardwick, Stephen Asplin, Kevin Vallejos, Maidbek Oralby, Elijah Smith, and Jillian Robertson. $0 remaining. Enter. Folks, that is it for episode 204 of the Tap That MMA podcast. Looking forward to UFC Vegas 114 this weekend. Again, a lot of combat sports coming up this week. Follow me on Twitter at RotoBrady. Follow me on Instagram at RotoBrady MMA. Follow the podcast at Tap That MMA Podcast on YouTube and Spotify. Now available on Apple Podcasts and Amazon Music. Look up for my MMA DFS Values Picks article that comes out on Fridays through RotoBaller. Check out my recent interlude episodes, especially the one with me, Connor Bone Sloan, talking to Devin Brown Bear Clark, a 17-fight veteran of the UFC, and a lot more interlude episodes in the on the books coming forward, even as we trudge forward into March Madness, the greatest month of every calendar year. Have yourselves a great week. Enjoy the wide world of sports that we have this weekend. Enjoy UFC Vegas 114, and peace.
I want to tell me what you see. Let's go ahead and see by the fight what you saw in the ring.
Fuck off. Take care of your underwears. I'm gonna you, man.